So before we jump into 3D camera tracking, I would like to have a look at what 3D in After Effects basically is. So I just made a new composition. So I went to Composition, New Composition, and I typed in the name here, Basic 3D Screencast, and I put it to 1280 on 720 and 25 frames per second composition. So I'm gonna take this one here. Okay. First of all, I'm gonna make a new solid. Sorry, new. Click right, new solid, and so this is basically the same as a composition, but it doesn't really matter for now. And I'm gonna call it floor. So this is my new solid, and you can actually see it over here. You can scale it around just like a normal like a normal 2D layer. And if we have a look at the properties here, what we see is we have a transform, an anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity, and we only have position like for a Y value and an X value. Okay, so for now let's just reset all this, reset and reset. To make this layer a 3D layer, it's as easy as making this here active. So I'm going to make this active. If I now select the layer, what you will see is you will get a gizmo here, which gives you the possibility to move or to position your solid on the y-axis. You can position it on the x-axis, and you can also now position it on the z-axis. Okay, so and if we have a look at what changed here, there is a new option here, material options, and if we go to the transform, we not only get X and Y, what we also get a Z value, so a depth value. But basically it still is a 2D layer. It still is a solid 2D layer. We can easily see this if we now, for instance, make a new camera. After Effects will ask us what sort of camera. You can change a whole bunch of things here, but I'm just gonna leave it as it is. It's a regular camera now, and most of the time I like a 2-node camera. So I create a new camera, and now we actually look. You didn't see anything change here, but we've always been looking through the active camera, which is now camera 1, which is my camera that I've just made. This is the active camera. So let's have a look at how I like to look at 3D in After Effects. First of all, I'm going to a 4 views left. Okay, and this will basically give me a top, a front, and another front view here. I can change this one, for instance, to a let's say a sorry, that's over here, a left view. So now we have a left view, top left, and a front view. Basically what you see here, you see your 3D camera. This is what the camera sees, and these are top, left, and front views. But you can also, if you select one of these and you go here, or you hit the C key, C. So if you hit the C key, you will toggle through orbit, pan, zoom, and your camera. So if we go here and we, for instance, go to a panning function in the top view, you see we can actually pan in the top view. If I zoom in or zoom out, I can actually zoom in and out of the top view. I can do the same thing as here, and I can do the same thing in the front view. So if I zoom out of the front view, just a little more, there we go. All right, so basically if we have a look here, so there's 2 things you can do. You can really zoom in and zoom out, and then basically you will see that After Effects is only showing this size, which is the comp size, where you can actually see through. If I zoom in again and I use my regular keys like the comma and the dot, then I will also zoom into this view, but you see I'm not really zooming in with a camera. I'm not zooming with this camera, but I'm zooming with the camera for the top view right here. And here I can see my active camera. So if I hit this here and I now go like this into my active camera, then you will basically see that I'm actually moving the camera. You can see it here in the top left and in the front views. You can easily see it there. And if I toggle, I go to camera, for instance, I can rotate. Okay. And now you easily see that it's a 3D layer. I can pan. If I hit C again, I can pan around my camera. That's what it does. And if I now I'm zooming in and I'm zooming out again. It's very easy to navigate in 3D space with your camera if you have these views here active. So basically, if I select my camera and I hit the V key, which is basically the selection tool. So I don't need to really select my camera. If I just click here and start dragging all at once, you can very easily rotate your camera, and it will basically rotate around this second node. So I can put my second node over here and maybe go into the top view, and now I can easily rotate around the solid that I've basically made here. Same thing over here. So I deselect my camera and I click and start dragging while I still hold my mouse button down. So that will allow you to orbit very easily around with your camera. If I now just go here, I can also use the gizmo of the camera to only travel in the y-axis, to travel, sorry, in the x-axis, to only travel in the z-axis, and right here to only travel in the y-axis. Okay, but you see, when the camera is already selected and you go here, then you will also always be stuck to the gizmo. If you deselect it, hit it, and go like this, then you can navigate very much freely. So this is now a 3D layer. So I'm just gonna position my camera like this, maybe. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to rotate this layer, and I'm going to make a floor out of it. So also in this view, I can very easily go to my rotate tool, which is here, and it's the W key. So I hit W, and now I can actually rotate into my canvas over here. I'm now rotating over the X axis, and if I hold down Shift, it will actually rotate in increments of 45 degrees. So as you'll see here, it's a good idea to have the rotation properties on here, so you can see it also responds there, and you can actually now, so I'm going to put it to 270. I'm going to hit the V key to move it down, so I move down my layer. Okay, there we go. I'm going to move it a little bit in front of the camera, and I'm actually going to scale my 3D layer so I get a nice kind of a floor. Okay, the next thing I'm going to make is I'm going to make a new layer, which is a text layer, and I'm going to type in 3D text and hit the enter key on my numeric keyboard. So for now, this is still a 2D layer. So if I start to, if I grab my camera here, hang on, still at the V key, I hit my camera and I start rotating around, you see this is still a 2D layer, which is existing. I can see it, but I see it only as a 2D layer. Let's make this a little bigger. Yeah, there we go. So I've made here a text object which has a stroke onto it. Just for now, I'm gonna basically disable the stroke. So I'm going to take away the stroke. And I'm going to make my text a 3D text. So there we go. So now it also gets this gizmo where you can actually move it into Y, X, and Z. Okay, and I can very easily position it now on these views here. So I can actually put it so it's resting on the floor, and you see it will actually interact with the floor. So if I drop it here, it will be going underneath my floor. Just have a look at the camera, make a little bit of a so I'm just gonna position my camera a little bit and move it in slightly, just like this. Okay, maybe move this a little more to the front, so you can see you can very easily navigate into these views here and make a composition the way you would like it to be. Okay, so let's just make sure it sits on the floor very nicely. So what we can do now is but basically it's still our 2D layers, and that's the thing in After Effects. You can actually only work with 2D layers, so they can exist in the 3D space, but they still are, you know, simple 2D layers, and that will basically always be like that. The only objects that can really exist in 3D space are basically cameras and one other thing, and that's, for instance, lights. So I create a new light. Just gonna go with so I'm gonna create a spotlight for now. It has a certain intensity, it has a color, a cone angle, all kinds of nice stuff, and I'm gonna put on cast shadows. I'm gonna hit OK. So now, as long as we don't have a real light existing into our scene, we're gonna get a very flat shading. But as soon as I create a light, After Effects is gonna start to shade. So again, I'm going to position this onto my text here, and you can see with the properties of this light, I get a whole bunch of shading, and there's a lot of options here on the light. And while we're in here now, you still have to put on the cast shadow is already on. But by default, when you create a text layer, you go to the material options, cast shadows is switched off. So as soon as I hit this on, you will start to see a nice shadow here. I'm gonna double click this light layer and change some of the settings. So I'm gonna increase my intensity a little bit. When preview is switched on, you can actually see what you're doing. And maybe this shadow darkness I can change a little bit, and the shadow diffusion, so you can make a harsh shadow, hard shadow, or you can make a diffuse shadow. And actually After Effects makes some nice shadows very quickly. You can also see them here in the top view. For instance, if I hit the C key and I start to zoom in a little bit on this and hit the C key 2 more times, you see After Effects is actually creating a shadow which gets more and more diffuse the further it gets away from here. So if I now start to hit the C key over here, I go to camera, I can really orbit around, but you see it's still a 2D layer. It's still a 2D text. There is a possibility in After Effects to make an extrusion here. Let's do this real quick. So if I now go to, instead of classic 3D, you can hit this button and you go to Ray Traced 3D. You hit OK. You see After Effects starts to render all of a sudden, and into the 3D text option, a new option has become available, which is geometry options. And here, for instance, you can set a certain extrusion depth. Let's have After Effects calculate it. It takes a while. So there we go. And so After Effects is going to extrude my text, but it takes extremely long. So it's a very, basically it's a very slow feature. I'm just going to increase this a little bit. And maybe for now I just put it on a quarter, which is going to make it work a little faster. So if I now orbit around again with my camera, just going to zoom out here a little bit. Hit the V key and just grab the camera. So you will now see that I have an extruded text, but it renders extremely slow. So to be honest, we're not gonna really work with this kind of text. It just slows it down too much. So I'm going back to classic 3D, and here we go again, and I'm gonna put it back on maybe full resolution. That's more interactive here, and there we go. So we have a nice 3D text. Of course, an option to give some 3D illusion might be playing around with the text a little bit. So what I can do is I can select my 3D text, for instance, and I can hit Command D, or I can go here and go to Edit Duplicate. It's Command D. And for instance, this second text, I can, push it a little bit back in Z space, and I can make a third one, for instance, and I can push that one back into Z space even further. So this will give me a simple sort of 3D effect. I just put this text a little bit too far away, so let's push it, bring it back just slightly. And there we go. Maybe just like this, and then we can start playing with some settings, just to prove that we're still living in this 2D kind of space. I mean, all sorts of effects that you can put on this text, you will easily see that it's still 2D. It still remains a 2D layer. So, but to smack this text a little bit up, what I can do is I can go to my text here, and then here go to character, and for instance give it a nice stroke, maybe a stroke like this, and hit OK, and then make the stroke, I mean maybe like 3 or 5, and say that the fill is going to be over the stroke. Let's have a look here. That's our stroke. And where is it? It's right here. I don't see it. Let's isolate this one. I don't see my stroke right now. Stroke over fill, no, it's fill over stroke, and maybe make it a little thicker. 9. Now I have to select my my text here and give this 5, maybe 9. Now we start to see it. Maybe 30. There we go. There you have it. So 20 is good, and maybe for the second one I'm also going to give it a stroke, and let's give it a more white stroke and give that one a 10 stroke here. And then for the last one, what I can do is I can give it also a stroke, but give it a fill over stroke thing here, and give that a 0.3. Hang on, I have to select my text first. This one was 10, and then go to my front text and give that a white stroke, just like that, and say stroke overfill. That's good, and just a little wider, maybe just a little more, 3 pixels, maybe, perhaps just something like this, and make it also a little bit. Okay, so there we go. So basically now we also have quite nice 3D sort of text. It's not really 3D, but it looks like it is 3D. Okay. So if we now maybe start to play a little bit with the light, put on the intensity a little bit more. Hit OK. We can select the 3 text objects all at once and just push them up a little bit because it's getting planted into the floor. So we get some really very nice 3D text. In After Effects with the camera here, the camera option, is you can basically put on depth of field. And as soon as I turn on depth of field, you will see that there is a new line appearing here onto your camera, and it's basically telling you where the focus distance is. So I've just put this on right now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this whole thing. So I select the 3 layers, hit Command D, and just move them all maybe on top of this. And I'm just going to move this a little bit in front. Okay. Reposition my camera maybe. So there we go. So basically what we see now here is that we get sort of depth of field. So if I go back to my camera settings and I put the aperture way much higher, you see we will get some, let's first of all select this text and put it a lot closer to the camera. Okay, and maybe scale it a little bit down, hit the S key, scale it so we can see both texts and give it some light as well. So I put the light a little to the back here, maybe put it up a little bit, just like this. So what you can see now is that this is my focus line. So if I really want my first text to be in focus, I can actually position the focus line. So I'm going to position it. I'm looking at the top view now, so I can actually position it straight onto this text, and you will see this text is going to be out of focus. And when I travel with the camera towards the other object, you see the other object will get into focus while the second one is getting out of focus. So let's go down a little bit so we both see them now. So, and now it's rendering with a fast rectangle, but you can make it a little nicer, maybe an octagon, which is going to give you slightly better effect here. And so let's move it back here, and now this text is again going to be nicely in focus, while the other text is going to be blurred out of focus. So basically it reacts a little bit like a real camera does. And the amount of defocusing is going to be set by the aperture here. So if I increase this value, this will get a lot more out of focus. And then maybe with a heptagon, there we go. So it's going to be a lot more out of focus. No reason to exaggerate. So basically it reacts like the iris of a camera. And this actually, the focus distance basically reacts as so here you can actually tell After Effects where it has to be in focus, and this line here is going to tell that. So you can also see in these views, it's very easy to see where the focus basically is. Layers, but of course also a for instance a shape layer can exist into 3D space. For now I'm just going to turn off my depth of field because it's slowing the things down here. So if I select this shape layer and I draw a quick shape here, okay, and I hit 3D, now it will start to live in 3D space. So you basically see it jumped over here. You can switch it off, put it back on again, and as soon as it hits it starts to live in 3D space. You can basically select it and, you know, move it around into 3D space. There we go. So now I'm going to put it just in between these two layers. See, it will also intersect with this here. And I think you also get the material options here, like we do with every 3D layer. And you can actually slightly change all the settings from this object. So let's move it maybe over here and hit it into Z space. So if we get it behind this one, it will receive shadows and it will also cast shadows, but not just like that. So now it doesn't really cast any shadows. So if you would like it to cast shadows, you have to put it on, and now it will also cast shadows. Let's have a look. See, it will also cast shadow, but you still see it is still a 3D a 2D layer that lives in a 3D space, but you can get some really nice effects. For instance, another thing I would like to show, let's hide this for a second. What you can also do is I can make, for instance, a new solid, call this a wall, make it a 3D layer, and just push it back slightly so it's behind the other texts, and move it slightly over there. Okay, and maybe push it in the ground. What I would like to show is that you can still work with masks as we did on 2D layers, because it still is a 2D layer. So if I now, for instance, I'm going to solo this layer, and into this view maybe here, let me just quickly grab this one. So if you select the pan tool, or you middle click on the mouse, you can pan around also. But you see, you pan around on the front view, not with a front view camera. So I can still come in here, I select the layer wall, and I can still grab a ellipse masking tool, and I can draw an ellipse. I just keep the mouse button pushed and hit the space bar, and I reposition it. So if I now unsolo the layer, you see I still get here you see I've actually masked it into a 3D layer. And if we, for instance, subtract the mask, you will basically get the opposite. So you can basically work with masks very easily. So I can also hit the V key and reposition the mask and do whatever I do with masks, or like to do with masks. So you can make some special shapes in here, and it all reacts as it is a 3D object, as it is a 2D object. If your resolution gets down onto this, you may have to also here collapse the transformation, or for vector layers, continuously rasterize it. But that's still quite okay with this one. And in the materials options, if you put on cast shadow, it will again also cast a shadow. So let's have a look here in the back. Let's have a sneak peek on the back. So it will also work just like this. If we would like to pre-compose, so let's have a look here. If we would like to, for instance, rotate these 3 layers, there's a bit of a problem. I can select these 3 layers and I can hit the W key to rotate on the Y-axis. But what you will see, actually, it's rotating around the same point. So this is not really what I would like, because these 3 layers are all behind one another, and when you start rotating it, it won't do it as you would expect. So what you would have to do is you have to select the 3 layers. So I select the 3 layers with the shift key and I hit pre-compose, or maybe go over here, layer pre-compose, and I call this 3D text pre-comp, and I hit enter, and what you see, it will basically disappear. So it now has moved somewhere over here, and it has become a 2D layer again, because this is no longer reacting as a 3D layer. So I don't even see it here. I can see it here, but basically it has become again a 2D layer. And let me prove it to you. If I scale it down, there we go again. It is again a 2D layer. So I'm gonna hit Control Z. 2 things you can do. You can hit this button, and then it will become a 3D layer again. It will not become a 3D layer, but it will be basically, for compositions, it will be collapsed. Transformations will be collapsed, and now I can very easily select it. I can not select it because it is a collapsed 3D layer, so the transformations are no longer working here. But what I can do is I can actually copy my camera. I hit Control C, double click on the pre-comp, and paste my camera into this composition. So now this is going to be, it's 3D layers with a 3D camera. And what I can do now is I can make this a 3D layer again. And what you will see is it will actually now react as a 3D layer into my composition. So let's reposition it. Okay. Reposition this here just real quick. I can also put on cast shadows. So this will cast shadows again. But still, if I rotate it, it will not look as you would expect, because it still is a 2D layer. So what you would basically have to do then is you would have to, because I copied my camera in here, what you would have to do is you would basically have to link the cameras.